and welcome into the 13th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Co. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my usual suspect and partner in crime, the Doc, John Macaroon from Doc and Jock. Doc, what's going on today, my man?
Vito, happy to see you. I'm glad you parked directly in front of the studio.
Parked in the right spot today, huh?
We didn't want to offend the elderly business people in the complex 2 weeks in a row. I'm glad to see you. I'm looking forward to hearing what's been going on in the news and notes with the Tigers, as well as the ALCS and the NLCS. Oh, baby, let's kick this bad boy off.
So first off, the ALCS, and KC Royals ace Johnny Cueto gets rocked in his Game 3 start against the Jays in the Rogers Center, and all is right with the world, or at least in mine now. And how about this Cueto stat? According to Katie Sharp of SB Nation and Sports Illustrated's The Cauldron, he's the second starting pitcher in postseason history to allow 8 or more runs in 2 innings pitched or fewer. The other, Tom Glavine in the 92 NLCS against, I believe, Jim Leyland and the Pittsburgh Pirates, who were led by Barry Bonds, Andy Van Slyke, all those great players that never got over the hump and got to the World Series with the Buccos back in the early 90s. And exactly his final Game 3 line is as follows: 2 innings pitched, 6 hits and 8 earned runs allowed, plus 4 base on balls permitted, and 2 Ks recorded for the man that is known as Johnny Cueto. And it's Johnny with the H-N-N-Y at the end, the 2 N's and the Y. That is the man there in KC, which, after all this talk, it begs the question for me to you, Doc. Can KC truly win it all with him being the ace of its pitching staff? Your take on that?
Well, first of all, credit to the Doc for correctly getting Kansas City to the ALCS.
Somebody didn't get it right.
I knew
it was
that.
This guy, wasn't it?
Well, listen, you always got to go with the home. You always go with the odds, the home team, and Kansas City with Johnny Cueto advanced. Now, you're bringing up a good point regarding the consistency of Johnny Cueto. Now, that was a tough game going into, Game 3. Rogers Center, the fans are frenzied, and it was a desperation situation, right? They were down 2 games to none.
Had to win. I mean, they would have gone down 3-0, even in their home ballpark. I do not like their odds of coming back from that.
And sometimes you do have to give the opposing team credit. Johnny Cueto definitely wasn't effective, and I can see your point that he's inconsistent, but he's a guy that you couldn't use on your team at a time when if you need a pitcher, if you need a solid guy that can eat up some innings, that can do some damage. And I know it's tough. I know in your eyes you view him as inconsistent, but for me, I like Johnny Cueto, but not at the price that he's going to probably want to command. At the $14 to $16 million range, he's serviceable. But if he's going to go up into that Max Scherzer land, no, then he's not worth it, and I agree with you.
He's not worth that ace money price tag, definitely. I would say at 150 to maybe 175, I would say is where he should max out at if you're the Tigers and Avila, pursuing top line, front of the line starting arms in the offseason, and a guy like Cueto is one of those names that is out there who you want to potentially pursue if he's at the right price tag, under 200 mil. Nothing at 200 mil or north of it, because he's not worth that as more of a great number 2 and lesser number 1. Not a bona fide ace. I've said this so many times. I've beaten a dead horse, but I'm still going to say it once again. He is not a bona fide ace. Zach Greinke now, though, opting out of his contract. He is out there on the open market. How about him coming to Motown maybe in 2016?
Man, Vito, you got to be really disappointed if you're a Dodgers fan. You spend year after year. You're among the MLB leaders in spending, and yet you don't advance again. And a lot of people are talking that Don Mattingly should not survive this year. He isn't taking the team far. And the team, if it doesn't advance, if the Dodgers don't advance far in the playoffs, they lose a ton of money based on that payroll because they're not getting the gates. And now you're gonna have to, start thinking about maybe losing some of those pieces that you've added. And Zach Greinke, it definitely behooves him to test free agency. And I agree with him. Go out there on the open market, because that's a guy who had a stretch earlier in the year that was absolutely phenomenal. He's out there in that Max Scherzer land, and he'll get some big-time dollars. So he definitely listened to his agent, and he's going to get paid.
He'll get paid big time. We know that this offseason. And he might get paid that 200 mil price tag over the long term of 6 or 7 years. He's had those mental flare-ups, though, in the past. Remember, he hasn't been always the most steady mentally on the mound every 5th day. And back in his days at the KC Royals when he was an ace, had that potential, all that material and stuff all the time to throw a complete game no-hitter every 5th day. He had mental flare-ups where he wasn't always sane and good enough to stay in the ball game. There's 6 or 7 and deal with all that pressure of a bona fide ace kind of starting pitcher or just an ace kind of starting pitcher. So that begs the question now, is he himself a bona fide ace? Because I said it accidentally there, but he's more of that borderline ace himself. Now, a great season this year, and you got to say he's an ace based off of that. But with everything that's in his past, hopefully that's all in his past and won't flare up again. That's a big question with him when you're committing 6 or 7 years and then 200 mil maybe to him.
Now, Vito, I'm going to ask you to put on your GM hat. So you're a general manager, you got yourself a team, and you got yourself a beautiful owner who will just say, okay, Vito, you got the checkbook, go get me a winner. I'm going to stay back in my luxury box. I'm going to eat my, caviar, drink my champagne. You, Vito, run my team. You're the GM and president. And now you got a couple different options. Do you open your checkbook and give big time money to a big time pitcher like a Jake Arrieta, a Keuchel from Houston, a Zach Greinke, a Cueto? Or do you say, you know what? I want to find a guy like a Miguel Cabrera in his prime when he was 28 to 30, a guy that's going to mash you 40 to 50 home runs, that's going to generate a buzz. Are you a guy that would lean toward a dominant pitcher being more effective or a dominant hitter?
A dominant pitcher like a Greinke. I think Greinke's the top target out there that you want to go and get if you're Mike Gillich and Al Avila and the front office brass of the Tigers. So with this new regime, I think they might target him and should target him as the number one starting pitcher out there on the open market. Better than Cueto, and I think maybe even better than David Price, potentially. Greinke's looked better in the postseason, remember, in recent memory than Price has. Price has not been that sharp. Even in Game 2, remember, on the road in KC, everything just blew up on him. He had a good game going, a one-hitter, I believe, and then at some point, everything just broke loose, opened up, the rivers, the dam opened up.
See, Vito, now
and killed him.
Yeah, when I ask you that now, I might be prone to disagree with you. I think that if a pitcher gets a big-time contract, he's always one pitch away from his career being over in terms of the fact that, a lot of these pitchers are, undergoing Tommy John surgery. And look at a guy like Miguel Cabrera. He missed a lot of games this year, but going forward, you still have a realistic expectation that he can hit 30 to 40 home runs. So if I'm the general manager, I'm kind of thinking, along the lines of, I would maybe build a team with one massive superstar and then maybe a bunch of guys in that second tier range, a bunch of number twos, and maybe not go with a solid number one who's tying up so much money. Maybe you go with a bunch of guys like a Anibal Sanchez, Doug Fister, Zimmerman, a bunch of guys who are maybe in that 2 to 3 range, and just kind of let the big boys deal with the number ones in the $200 million range. And I'm going to go with the philosophy of getting a bunch of number 2s and 3s. And with one massive superstar who's a hitter, I think you can have success there.
Well, and I think when you break the floodgates and those floodgates open up for a starting pitcher too, you are bound to have a bad starting pitching performance. So they're bound to have a bad one every so often. Not every 5th day, but maybe every 5 starts they have a bad start where the floodgates truly do open up, and there's no protecting that from happening. There's no getting back from it in that one given start. So anything can happen in those starts for starting pitchers. They can just totally fall on their faces and be really, really bad and not have their command, not have their their stuff overall. So for me, with that being said, and with the Tommy John operations are happening left and right for these starting arms and all these pitchers, you could make the argument, I think you're right, that a top hitter, is better to have him, better to have a guy like that in his prime that can hit and mash for 30 home runs, drive in 100, hit 300, hit 320, hit 330, like a Miguel Cabrera. Thing is, those guys don't grow on trees. Those starting pitchers are more likely to grow on trees, or at least we're seeing that more in recent memory, along with some good young hitters too. But if these pitchers, my opinion, if these pitchers stay healthy, avoid the Tommy John surgeries, these pitchers can have as good of, if not better, careers than these hitters.
Okay, so early observations from you in terms of the ALCS. How are you liking the way it's shaped out so far with KC leading 2-1?
Right now, with how it's shaking up, the Royals look like they're still the feisty team that can come back from anything. And they scored all those runs in Game 3 after being down 9-2. They lost 11-8, so they scored all those runs in the late innings to kind of make a comeback, make it a game to some degree. So the Royals are still that team that will never give up, never totally give in. That's why they're a dangerous team, and it looks like they're the better ball club right now and should win this series, even though I picked the Toronto Blue Jays, and my gut still tells me that I should stick with that pick, but then there's another part of me that says the Royals with how they've played, and because you picked them, they've already won their first round series when I picked the Stros to beat them head-to-head. So with all that being said, I want to almost reverse my pick here to the Royals, but I still got to be an honest man. As I said before, I picked the Jays. I'm still picking the Jays, but the Royals are looking more and more like that better team in the ALCS. And what's your take on that? Because I think you're on the bandwagon still with the Royals and see that they're playing better than the Jays right now.
I was totally shocked that David Price was cruising along. We were watching the state game as well as getting updates with the Royals in Toronto. And he's cruising along, and I believe he got to the 7th inning, and then he just struggled.
The floodgates just opened.
The floodgates opened,
right?
And I've never seen a guy who is so solid in the regular season, who is able to just mow people down, give you 8 solid innings, can throw 110, 120 pitches regularly, start after start. But when it gets to the postseason, dude is just flatlining and is just, it's unbelievable. Loser of his first 7 postseason starts. And I'm just like, wow, man, come on. They needed him, and the Royals got to him. They waited, they were patient, and they got to David Price.
He's got to be better, and he's 0-7 because he hasn't been better through his first 7 postseason starts.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you don't know what it is. He's got the stuff. Is it mental now, or do you think maybe,
I think it's a mental battle, and the Royals they always battle. They're a battling ball club. 1 through 9 in their lineup. They make you pitch. They enhance your pitch counts to a high level. They make them increase throughout the game. They're not going to give up in an easy at-bat. They're not going to go 2 or 3 pitches into an at-bat and swing it all 3 and get out that easily. They're going to make you pitch 5, 6, 7, maybe 7 or 8 pitches per at-bat and tire you down throughout the game because of that, Doc.
As a Tigers and Lions fan, I hate to feel like I'm a jealous sports fan, but man, when you see Kansas City with a lead locked down, that's what a bullpen should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have to kind of turn away and be like, man, what if the Tigers just once put together a solid bullpen like KC? They got the lead when they came back versus David Price. Boom, boom, went to the bullpen. Lights out. No doubt. They did their job. That's what a bullpen's supposed to look like. And if it takes Al Avila 2 to 3 years to put together a bullpen, I don't know how much longer I can wait. Because you see Kansas City, they get the lead in the late innings, done. Game's over, and you don't really have to worry. With the Tigers, each and every game, even if they got a streak going with Alex Wilson, with Bruce Rondon, you never really felt like you were more than 1 or 2 games.
Man. It's always a roller coaster still. It really is.
It's nice to see good baseball, and I've been enjoying this series so far.
Tigers have to patch it up, and if the Royals get early leads like they have, when they do, you know what happens? They close it down in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning because their bullpen is so solid and gets it done 99.5% of the time, I'll say. So for me, that's the key now. The Jays outscoring the Royals early on in the game. So in the next 3-4 games, no matter how long it goes this series, because right now it's a 2-1 series in favor of the Royals. If the Jays tie it up, which I could see them doing with R.A. Dickey on the mound against Chris Young in Game 4 in Toronto, then you have to win 2 more games there to win the series, obviously, best of 7. That would be in 6 games. But if it goes to 7, that's another, let's think about it, that's another 3 games plus a Game 4, 4 games total, where the Jays, I believe, to win these games going forward, have to score more than their opponent, the Royals, in the early innings. That's the key for the Jays, because if they get down early on, the Royals get a good enough lead. Once you get into the late innings, like you said, it's a shut-it-down kind of bullpen, where all those bullpen arms, they get it done. They can be flame-throwing, not as much flame-throwing, but they still find a way to get it done and to close down ball games when they have good enough leads. And really, even leads of only 1 run or 2 runs. That's just their M.O., right? What they do, what they've been known to do. So it's not going to change at this point either. They've shown it throughout the postseason last year and this year. They're going to keep getting it done in the 8th and 9th innings. And that's why the Jays, it's vital for them to get early leads. If they don't, they will lose this series. And like I said, it's looking more and more likely. The Royals have that fight in them. They're feisty. They've had better starting pitching. And their ace-type pitchers in the Royals, or guys that maybe aren't even aces, have pitched better than guys like David Price of the Jays. But the good thing for the Jays is Cueto has struggled. If Cueto continues to struggle, because he'll have to pitch in Game 7 if there is a Game 7. If he does continue to struggle, you could see him struggling again in that Game 7.
Yeah, Vito, in this series, it's really going to come down to who's going to have the clutch hits, who's going to be able to weather the storm early in these games, and the starting pitching just has to come through for both these teams. I mean, these teams are relatively close. You don't see a significant edge either way, so it's going to come down to who has the clutch hit, who is able to handle the pressure, and if Kansas City can manage and eke one out, then I think it can be relatively done. It can be done relatively quick in 5 or 6 games.
And it might come down also to his Game 7, the home field advantage, and that is the Royals having Game 7 at home with Cueto. So, with that being said, if it's a Game 7, I got to take the Royals in Cueto, because Cueto looked good in Game 5 against the Stros at home, remember, in that must-win game. Another must-win scenario, that would be in Game 7 of this series, the ALCS, against the Toronto Blue Jays. So I would like the Royals odds then, who would have Cueto, Jays having Stroman, a youngster. He's a 5'8" guy, throws heat, was good in Game 3, got it done and out-dueled Cueto, but still wasn't great. He's still a youngster, younger than Cueto. If he has to go up head-to-head against him in Game 7, I like the Royals' odds with Cueto on the mound over Stroman in that Game 7 scenario, where it would be at Kauffman Stadium, because the Royals have the better record, had the better record in the regular season, so they have that home field advantage, and they will in the World Series as well this year.
Okay, now switching over and looking at what's going on over there on the NL side. Ooh, the Mets are on fire. They're playing well. They have come out to a 2-0 lead, and the Cubs, I really feel for their fans. They're so excited. They are really ready to erupt as a fan base. The history of the Cubs, the fact that, the fan base's motto has been always next year, and now they won their first playoff series in such a long time. I think they said they won their first playoff divisional series ever. And they celebrated.
For who now, the Cubs?
The Cubs.
Well, they clinched at home for the first time in their franchise's history.
That's right.
First time at Wrigley Field. That is true.
And they celebrated. They had a good time. And you just feel for that fan base. I'm rooting for the Cubs because that fan base deserves it, really. The Mets have had success before. They've had heartbreak. But a team like the Cubs, an organization like that, deserves it. But if they don't make it through, which is kind of unlikely right now, if they don't, you still got to look out for them because remember, they're doing this with their manager, Joe Madden, early, premature.
It is prematurely, definitely, with this young core.
Nobody thought they were going to make a run like this. And if they load up and they bring on David Price and they add one or two more offensive weapons and shore up a couple of defensive positions, look out. The Cubs could be a serious contender for the next 5 years.
They don't need any other hitter. They're a great young core 1 through 9 in their lineup. They need that frontline starting arm to tag along with Arrieta, who's already the ace of the staff, the Cy Young favorite, going to win the Cy Young. Won 20-plus games with the Cubbies this year. And he was so great in the second half. But my concern, I'm going to reverse the course here and look at Arrieta now. He has struggled in recent memory now in the playoffs, not been as sharp. And it's all these dominant starting pitchers not looking as good in the postseason, Doc. How about the theme of the postseason being that so far, with the starting arms at least?
Listen, at this point in time, it's really fascinating how hitters can get film on pitchers, how they know what's coming in different situations. So in the end, it's a cat and mouse game between the pitcher and the batter. The batter knows the tendencies. The batter knows, which pitches are going to be thrown in different situations. So I believe a great hitter has maybe a couple percentage points better chance than a great pitcher. They
study each other, remember. They both study film.
Yeah, so I'm saying 1 to 2% advantage if it's a great hitter versus a great pitcher on the same level. Different matchups will dictate different situations, but in the end, a lot of times, too, the umpire will dictate how effective a pitcher is depending on how he's calling the strike zone. If a pitcher can get just that extra inch or two here and there off the plate, it really swings the favor. It turns the tide in their favor. But sometimes these umps, they kind of call it really super tight or they call it inconsistent, so a pitcher might have a hard time getting into that groove. But it's really tough. In the end, it's really tough to get outs as a major league pitcher, but I give credit to all the pitchers. But yeah, definitely you're right on point. Arrieta struggled, and the Cubs are going to have to beat the Mets. The Mets aren't going to beat themselves, and the question is going to be, can the Cubs really improve their play by an extra 10 to 15%? I'm just not that sure they're ready just yet.
The Cubs have to win Game 3. If they don't, the series is over by far. It might already be over, being down 2-0 to the Mets, who won their first 2 at Citi Field. Now the series shifts to Wrigley Field for Game 3. You have Kyle Hendricks on the mound against Jacob deGrom, the best starting pitcher, arguably, of the Mets this year. And maybe even not arguably. He might be the best starting pitcher, hands down, for the Mets right now and their staff. Harvey's right there, too. Harvey's been good. You have Syndergaard, who's been good. DeGrom's been good in the postseason, too. All these youngsters stepping up when it matters most to get it done in the playoffs. They keep doing it. They're going to be nearly unbeatable if they continue getting timely hitting out of the Grandy man, who can, Curtis Granderson, Daniel Murphy. All these guys have proven to be able to hit this postseason for the Metropolitans. That's why I like them in this series against the Cubs a lot more than the Cubs having any chance of coming back, and especially with Arrieta not being as sharp. And their bats are young, where the Mets, Granderson, Murphy are not as young. You have David Wright in that lineup, too. Kelly Johnson. So Cespedes, who is not as young. That's why I like the Mets in this series still to hold on to this 2-0 series lead. And I could see a sweep because I believe they're going to win Game 3 against Kyle Hendricks, even though it's in Wrigley. That's when it could be a sweep for the Mets. And meaning they're going to make it all the way to the World Series for the first time since 86, I believe. I believe it was 86. It was 85 for the Royals before last year. 86 for the Mets. And it will be a very good match, in my opinion, right now between the Mets and the Toronto Blue Jays. Even though the Royals are looking more and more like that team that's going to advance to play in the World Series, and for a second straight year, I still have to stay with my pick of the Jays to play the Mets in the World Series this year.
Yeah, Vito, I agree with you. I think the Mets are playing very well. They have great pitching. They have, timely hitting, and they're playing very well. I don't know. I just think, I got a feeling, when you get to the Game 7 of the World Series and you lose in that fashion, when you got the guy, the tying run 90 feet away, there's something about the Royals that just kind of, you got that team of destiny feel. So I know you feel like it's the Mets, and they're definitely a great team, but I kind of like teams that have kind of struggled before, have gotten there, and have kind of tasted that disappointment. The margin for victory is so small. Really, just a couple things here and there. And an edge that you get is when you've gotten there before and you lose. I think that gives you that little bit of an extra edge and motivation to do a little bit extra, to focus a little bit harder. So as we sit now, I like the World Series matchup to be Kansas City versus the Mets, with Kansas City really taking it down in 6 or 7 games.
You can't get off that bandwagon that is the Kansas City Royals bandwagon, Doc. You're just loving that team all the way from the start to the finish, but you're sticking with the pick, and I like that out of you. And you know what? They've tasted now bitter disappointment, bitter defeat in Game 7. They know what it takes to a certain extent, and more than the Mets. But the Royals are not the team of destiny. I don't care what they did last year. They were the team of destiny last year. They're not going to be it for a second straight postseason. That's why I believe the Jays will catapult the Royals to come back and win this series, even though the Royals, as I said, are up in the series 2-1 as of this podcast being recorded on Tuesday. But still, team of destiny is something that matters a lot in the postseason, and it's the Mets this year. That's why I could see the Mets winning it all, and if I had to pick a team right now to win it all, which I will right now at this moment, I'm picking the New York Mets to beat either the Blue Jays or your team of destiny, the Kansas City Royals. Doc.
Now, if we're throwing out labels, team of destiny, I think, is the Cubs. I mean, they got history.
Well, they keep losing, but they're down 2-0. The Mets have some history, too, and haven't won in a while, remember.
I think the best of the 4 teams is Kansas City, and the team of destiny, though, a team that, if you said could kind of do some miraculous things, could get down 3-0 and then maybe come back and win 4 straight. Maybe the Cubs. If
they have no playoff history of being successful besides
of course not.
In 1908 when they beat the Tigers. That was the last time they won a World Series, when Ty Cobb was playing on the Tigers.
I'm not going
Remember that, Doc.
I'm not going off of history here. I'm going off the team of destiny this year.
Uh-huh.
Maybe the baseball gods are like, finally.
Bad omen, but it may be the time for the gods to actually strike in favor, right, of the Cubbies this year. So if they had that 3-0 deficit, their backs hugely against the wall, then you could see the Cubs, you're saying, in that circumstance coming back.
I love when I'm doing the podcast and stuff just kind of pops in my mind. The Cubs are tied to the curse of the Billy Goat, aren't they?
The Billy Goat.
The curse of the Billy Goat.
Somebody brought a Billy Goat, though, recently to a playoff game for the Cubs this year to try to break that curse. And now they're saying because they won that first-round series and clinched that first-round series at home at Wrigley that they have broken the curse of the Billy Goat. But I don't think they have, extreme.
Refresh my memory, because I know I've seen reports, and I know it was tied to the Cubs, but refresh my memory. What's the curse of the Billy Goat? The
Billy Goat walked onto the field at some point. I don't even know it totally, because I don't keep track of all those curses and all those superstitions, because it's a superstition right now of the Cubs fan base. And you can look it up to figure out the history behind it. But they truly believe in that curse being hugely monumental and a huge factor in why they haven't won since 1908.
Okay, here it is on Wikipedia.
Yeah, so what is it saying about that Billy Goat curse, Doc?
The curse of the Billy Goat is a sports-related curse that was placed on the Chicago Cubs in 1945 when Billy Goat Tavern owner Billy Cianis was asked to leave a World Series game against the Tigers.
Remember, the Tigers won that World Series. Mm-hmm. Yes, they did, against the Cubbies.
Against the Tigers at the Cubs' home ballpark of Wrigley Field, because his pet goat's odor was bothering other fans. He was outraged and declared, "Them Cubs, they ain't gonna win no more," which has been interpreted to mean that there would never be another World Series game won at Wrigley Field. And the Cubs have not won a World Series since 1908 or appeared in one since 1945. The curse of the Billy Goat.
The last 2 times against the Tigers, 45 when they lost, 08 when they won. How about the Tigers are playing a huge factor as well? Maybe the curse of, the Tigers maybe a little bit, but more the Billy Goat. That's what the Cubs fans care about and really worry about. Even to this point in 2015, they still haven't advanced past that point to think this Billy Goat is no longer a factor in why we haven't been winning.
And the Cubs fans are pulling out all stops. I seen a Bartman lookalike at Wrigley Field.
They're trying to get past his curses, man. They got to break it some way, somehow. And now down 2-0, they need everything. All the luck in the world to get past the Mets, I think, who are a better starting pitching staff by far and a better all-around team with Cespedes, not hitting great, but still he's a big factor in the middle of that order. Granderson hitting at the top of the lineup, and Daniel Murphy being the superhero of the playoffs in all of baseball this year.
All right, let's take a quick break. Who's on the line? Someone's dialing up. You got a great guest this week. Who's on the line?
Michael Natelli of Fansided's MLB blog, Call to the Pen. It might be a site that I'm writing for. Sounds like I will be writing for Call to the Pen. He's the lead editor, lead writer of the site. Check him out on there. And then also he'll be joining me, yes, as you said, on this podcast today to discuss his Washington Nationals, also the NLCS and the ALCS.
Doc here for FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter and the official outfitter of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Visit FanaticU.com for all gear related to Detroit sports. If you're a fan of the Pistons, Tigers, Wings, and Lions, go visit FanaticU.com because they have a great selection of sports gear, hats, memorabilia. And if you go to FanaticU.com and shop online, when you check out, use the promo code DSP and at checkout, and you'll save 15% off your entire order. Anything and everything that you buy, you'll save 15% on, even clearance items. So visit FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter. And now back to Tigers Talk with Chirco and company.
And now with me on the 13th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is Michael Natelli of Call to the Pen, Fansided's MLB blog. Michael, what's going on today?
How's it going, Vito?
I'm very good. And hey, let's start off the discussion by talking a little bit about the Washington Nationals. Now, I know you know a lot about them. It's one of your favorite, if not your favorite, Major League Baseball club. So we got to open up the discussion by looking at their woes, specifically in the second half of the season. After having these World Series aspirations, Michael, to start the season with an already stacked rotation deepened by the big money signing of Max Scherzer and a good enough lineup anchored by budding superstar Bryce Harper, what, in your opinion, truly went wrong for the Nats in 2015? And when do you think the organization's slide this past season truly began?
Well, if everyone looks at it, they like to say that they underachieved, but if anything, I was, prior to his firing, one of the biggest defenders of Matt Williams, only because I personally thought that team overachieved considering what they had. If you look at it, they were missing Ryan Zimmerman for a good portion of the year. They were missing Jason Worth for a good portion of the year. That's, two guys who usually tend to get at least an MVP vote here or there. They missed an odd span for most of the year, and if you look at their record with him, it was roughly 12 games over 500, and without him, it was at least 3 or 4 games under 500. He played all of 60 games this year, so they're missing him for 100 games. Steven Strasburg dealt with injuries. Pretty much their entire bullpen dealt with injuries outside of Drew Storen, who managed to regress after they got Jonathan Papelbon. Aaron Barrett missed time. Craig Stanton missed most of the season. That's a pretty important core of their bullpen right there. Tanner Roark seemed to really just not get it together, moving back and forth between the rotation and the bullpen. Joe Ross, even when he got called up, he was phenomenal, but he was also inconsistent. Scherzer seemed to fall down the stretch for some reason. But, with guys like Zimmerman and Worth out, that leaves players like Clint Robinson and Danny Espinosa coming in the lineup, and Anthony Rendon was also out. Bench bat Dan Uggla was out for a little while there, and well, that's obviously the key piece. It always hurts. And so the fact that they actually got that kind of production out of the guys like Clint Robinson and Danny Espinosa, who both had pretty strong seasons, it's actually kind of remarkable if you think about it. They underachieved, but at the same time, they almost overachieved considering if you look at the roster that actually took the field every single day. But if you I don't know if you've read it, but there's this post found on the Washington Post by Barry Sperluga. He covers the Nationals for the Washington Post, and it documents basically these struggles that Matt Williams had with players that created this really bad locker room by going back to as early as June. He struggled with communicating with them lots of, poor communication matter the off days and stuff like that. And so going back to as early as June, there's really bad vibe in the locker room, and we tend to overlook team chemistry a lot. That obviously plays a pretty big factor, and that seems to be a big part of why he's not coming back.
And then, Nationals GM Mike Rizzo decided that manager, as you said, Matt Williams, who was really the problem, it looks like, inside the clubhouse with the chemistry of the ball club, not having a good gauge of his team and who they were, he ended up being the scapegoat for the Nats' huge slide in the second half, and it sounds like you believe rightfully so, and so do many of the Nats fans. However, with that being said, Michael, what other moves have to be made in order to totally right the ship in Washington in the immediate future?
Well, you have guys like Worth and Zimmerman on these long-term contracts, and it seems like, especially with Worth getting older, the health thing's only going to get worse. Zimmerman's not going to miraculously get healthier as he enters his 30s, and they signed him through 2020, so they're going to need to find ways to get him off days and keep him healthy. Maybe the option there is you get a guy like Brandon Moss at free agency, or you stick with Danny Espinosa and you give him some more playing time at first base, because he did get some reps at first base in an attempt to get him in the lineup down the stretch, and he actually looked pretty good there. You can also look at a guy like Ben Zobrist on the open market. He's Mr. Utility. Everyone knows that. And then shorten up that rotation with more consistent guys beyond Scherzer, because Jordan Zimmerman's going to be on the open market. Doug Fister's gone, And it sounds like they might trade Steven Strasburg now, so that gives you Scherzer, Gio Gonzalez, Tanner Roark, Joe Ross, and then an opening, because Lucas Giolito, AJ Cole, both not going to be ready to start the season, could contribute down the stretch. But a guy like Mike Leake, you get in there, probably not in the mix for Zach Greinke, David Price, or anyone like that. But the one guy you could, put them as a dark horse for now is Johnny Cueto, because the way he's been pitching, it looks like he's more potentially headed toward the one-year deal at this point. Everyone thought he was in line for this mega contract, but the way he's pitched, you don't know what you're getting with him anymore. And while, he's not exactly the consistent presence that you're looking for, they've had a history of going for these one-year guys, Dan Heron and Edwin Jackson in the past, where they're hoping to get a lot out of them on the one-year deal. So, Cueto could certainly fit that mold, too.
Now, what are the chances of Jordan Zimmerman returning, you think, in 2016 to the Nats?
Not impossible, but I would probably say he's not going to, only because at some point they're going to have to pay Bryce Harper. They already have long-term contracts in Zimmerman and in Worth. If they want to bring Denard Span back, it's going to cost them. They have to spend some money on the bullpen this offseason. They're going to eat a lot of money with Jonathan Papelbon, because it sounds like he's not coming back regardless, and he's guaranteed $11 million next year. There's no bad blood there, but I don't think that Zimmerman's coming back just because of the financials of it all.
Back to the managerial opening now that has been made open by the dismissal of Williams. Who are some of the favorites to fill that void inside the Nationals dugout in 2016? And out of all the favorites, Mike, who would you most like to see lead the Nats going forward?
Well, my favorite candidate was Randy Norris from day one, the longtime bench coach, but he's been since relieved of his duties and been rehired as a special assistant to Mike Rizzo. So that really opens the field here. You're looking at guys like, they keep looking back to Cal Ripken Jr., but at the same time they keep saying they want experience. So it's actually really confusing, and no one really knows what you're going to be getting in this managerial search. Bud Black has been mentioned as a candidate, and that would really help get their pitching staff going. Rob Gardenhire is interviewing today, actually. Longtime Twins manager. Phil Nevin's interviewing the AAA manager of the D-backs. And then Ron Lotus, the bench coach of the Giants, has also been given permission to interview, and people like him a lot. I think that'd be a great fit, as with Bud Black. The tricky thing is that they say they want experience, but the way I look at experience is if you didn't win the World Series, if it's that many more years, you couldn't. So it's a tricky game. But, it sounds like if I was a betting man, I'd put my money on either Black, Gardenhire, or Ripken.
And if they want experience, though, that would rule out Cal Ripken Jr., the Iron Man and MLB Hall of Famer Cal Ripken Jr., a man with no prior managerial or coaching experience. But with that being said, you put him third in your list of favorites to manage the Nats in 2016. So what are the true odds or chances of Cal Ripken taking over as the manager of the Nats in 2016?
Your guess is as good as mine, only because they say that they want experience, but then they mention all these guys that they're interviewing that have really no major league managerial experience. And I think that's because they're coming to find that, when you say experience, you think a guy like Tony La Russa, who's won multiple World Series, but there's just not those kinds of guys out there. The experienced guys there are some good managers out there. Gardenhire and Black are great hires, not guys who could just come in and have that World Series pedigree of taking multiple teams there. So that makes them have to open their options a little bit more. And that also being said, Rizzo is trying to spread his wings a little farther this time. Last time, Williams was the guy from day one. He had a good experience with him in his days in Arizona. And, it seemed like there was nothing that was going to make him not hire Matt Williams. So I'm giving props to Rizzo here because he's casting a much wider net this time around. But at the same time, as far as picking a manager, there's no clear-cut, resume that he's looking for. So your guess is as good as mine. But, I'd like to take Ripken's chances, certainly as, I wouldn't say likely, but certainly possible.
Speaking of Gardy, you already brought up Ron Gardenhire, and he was a potential managerial candidate to fill the vacancy of the Tigers if they would have fired Brad Ausmus. They kept Brad Ausmus, and not rightfully so in the opinion of many Tigers fans, including myself, who also cover the team and have watched the team for years and years with, Ausmus specifically, and what he did last year and this year, 2 years combined, where he faltered, really fell under a lot of criticism, and rightfully so because of managerial mistakes and bullpen mismanagement. And they still passed up on Gardenhire to keep him, though. So what does that say, if anything at all, about Gardy and the type of manager that he is and what these teams see in him at his current age and with his background with the Twins?
Well, if you look at it, the Twins seem to manage to run into good Yankees teams every single time they made it to the playoffs. And, that being said, they didn't get past them. So I think Gardenhire is, as a result, labeled as one of these guys who just can't get past the first round. And the Giants, or the sorry, not the Giants. The Tigers have done that, several times already, and Illich definitely wants them to go farther. So I think that may have, given them a bad bye with Gardenhire. But that being said, I don't think he's a bad manager. I think that they just decided that Osmus must have, some good clubhouse presence or something, and they want to roll with him one more year.
Do you think that was the right move, though, for the Tigers? Not to totally change up the topic, your conversation here, but what do you think about that move to retain Osmus for 2016?
I mean, the one thing I will say is you guys are missing Miguel Cabrera for quite some time there this season, and, a lot of things didn't quite go their way. So, and they still had a, decent season, all things being said. I mean, everyone that thinks that a missed playoff year is a wasted year, but if you look at their record, they still won, a solid amount of games. If you get Cabrera back healthy next year, you make some moves, and you're looking at a team that could easily compete, especially with the Royals set to lose Gordon and potentially reliever, I think.
So now on to the NLCS, and Jake Arrieta, first and foremost, failing to pitch like an ace for the Cubs in Game 2, Michael, allowing 3 runs before retiring a single hitter. And guess what? The Grandy man, Curtis Granderson, and Daniel Murphy were involved in the scoring once again for the Mets, as they have been all postseason long, it has seemed like. And Murphy even homered again, launching his 5th of the postseason. With that being said, first and foremost, Mike, how surprising was Arrieta's performance? I'm asking because of these following stats. His first inning ERA of 1.64 in 33 innings, which was the major's 3rd lowest among qualified starters. And then also, the last time he allowed a run in the first inning was on May 29th against the Royals. And the last time he allowed multiple runs in the first was the start before that on May 23rd against the D-backs, when he yielded 2. So how surprising was Arrieta's performance?
Well, it seems like these days you can't be a good pitcher without struggling in the postseason, right? You look at guys like Clayton Kershaw, David Price, who just can't seem to get it together consistently in the postseason. Johnny Cueto, for that matter, last night. That being said, it's not totally surprising, especially with this being, his first year ever playing in the postseason, and let alone the National League Championship Series. But if you look at the run, it was, pretty remarkable that of all teams to struggle against, it was the New York Mets. They played the Pittsburgh Pirates, who have at least as good a lineup. They played the Cardinals, who for some reason always seem to manage to get it together, even though they never post a pretty strong lineup. So it was interesting to see, but at the same time, all good things must come to an end, and that's not to say that Arrieta is now not going to play well, but he was due. He was due for a long time to have a rough start for as good as he's been, and I don't think that, if he's going to get the ball again, I don't think that you'll see the same thing next time around.
So, Mike, the Cubs return home to Wrigley Field for Game 3, down 2-0 to the Mets. Kyle Hendricks, who last took them out in Game 2 of the NLDS against the Cards, and allowed 3 runs, all 3 of the home run variety, on 4 hits in 4 and 2/3 innings pitched, will make the Game 3 start for Chicago against Jacob deGrom, who is 2-0 with a 1.38 ERA and 20 Ks after making 2 starts in the Mets' divisional round series with the Dodgers. And not that this is totally relevant for us because our podcast is released on Wednesday, but for you just looking at that matchup, can Hendricks outduel deGrom, or at least get close enough to outdueling him to help the Cubs get out of their 2-0 hole?
Well, Kyle Hendricks is as hit or miss a pitcher as you're going to get, and he's going to have to be pretty darn perfect going against Jacob deGrom on Tuesday. He can definitely do it, but he's going to have his off-speed going because the Mets seem to struggle when they're getting a variety of pitchers thrown at them, like any team does. They're going to pray that the wind's blowing in, and Hendricks at face value is pretty far an inferior option to deGrom, but he can definitely do it, and he has before. He pitched a phenomenal game in the LDS against the Cardinals, so there's no reason to believe he can't do it. It's just can the young 25-year-old kid handle this kind of pressure, with a 3-0 hole looming if he doesn't perform.
deGrom is one of the Mets' aces. Matt Harvey is another one of them. The Dark Knight.
We could do this all day, right?
Yeah. And Harvey, tell me this now. Will he make his scheduled Game 5 start after taking a line drive off his right triceps in Game 1?
It sounds like that's going to be decided either tomorrow or Thursday. And I think it's also going to depend on how this goes. If they're up 3-1, you could see it maybe pushed back. But if they're up, 3, they're facing a 3-2 hole, it's going to get tricky. So, or a 2-2 tie, it's going to be, they're going to lean on their ace. So it's really still not decided yet. They have plenty of options right now to go with, so it's not like they're in such a bad spot regardless.
So what do you make, though, of his agent Scott Boras taking an insurance policy out on the right-hander's arm?
I think it's just smart, that's smart baseball. You see that a lot of these guys have a bad track record coming back, and, especially if he's decided now that he's going to pitch. I believe he's at roughly 130 or 193.2 innings right now. which, a year after is not exactly such a good thing, all things being equal, but he's seemed to respond fine. The question is, how long can this keep going? And, a lot of teams have suddenly, it sounds like lost interest in him as an off-season trade candidate just because of the health risk. And you can't really blame Boris, because that's just smart to make sure that you're locking up some sort of money for the guy. Because as good as a pitcher as he is, there's always that risk, and putting that much taxation on your arm is only going to make it worse.
So you're on the spot here. Mets or Cubs in the NLCS, who takes it? And then ALCS, Royals or the Jays?
Based on play, the ALCS is much more of a toss-up, and for that reason, I'll go with the Royals. Sheer on their, they battled back last night down 11-4 to come back to 11-8, and while they lost, they were in a pretty big hole and still showed the composure to get it done. The Blue Jays are looking much more like a team that's just been there, for the first time, and they're having a little bit of fun, but at the same time, I don't think that they're going to get it done. The Royals have been there before. It's pretty much the same group as last year, and there's no reason to believe they can't do it again. And the LCS, I thought the Cubs were going to do it coming in, but they're finally showing their age a little bit, and all things being equal, pitching is greater than hitting in the postseason, and the Mets pitching is definitely coming together. Look at Noah Syndergaard, the 22-year-old rookie, and he threw 5.2 innings of one-run ball the other day, and it looks like they have it, and it's looking like a Royals and Mets World Series, which is something that in 2011 would have been the most astronomical thing you could ever say, but that's how it's looking to me.
And with that, Michael Natelli of Fansided's MLB blog Call to the Pen, thank you very much for all your time today on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, and have a good one. And thank you to Michael Natelli of Fansided's MLB blog Call to the Pen for joining me today on the 13th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Co. Great stuff from him. As usual, he was on my Blog Talk radio show back in the day. Great writer, great editor for Call to the Pen. Check it out on fansided.com, a great blog network for all things sports.
And still, though, I know he was disappointed as a Nationals fan, but Tigers fans still got to be way more disappointed.
Oh, please don't give me that.
The talent level was way better on the Tigers.
Well, no,
I'd say the talent level.
I'm going to discuss that one with you now and debate it, because the Nats had the better, I think, playoff potential to start the season with the better starting rotation. I think all-around talent to a certain extent. The lineup favored the Tigers. We know that, but overall-wise, I say the Nats. And they both had inexperienced managers. Matt Williams for the Nats, who got fired. Brad Ausmus for the Tigers should have been fired. We know that, right, after all these podcast editions. But with that being said, the Tigers had a good team, underachieved, and they lost more games. But I would say the Nats still underachieved more. Even though they had some injuries, the Tigers had their injuries too and lost a lot more games, I think, because of that than the Nats. The Nats still had their starting rotation really pitching in full effect, being healthy for the majority of the season. And Max Scherzer, as your ace, who signed him to that big contract, he underachieved a little bit in the second half, although he pitched 2 no-hitters over the course of the season, his first with the Nats. So for me, with the Nats only winning 83 games with all their World Series aspirations and even more World Series aspirations than our Tigers, I got to say they were a bigger disappointment overall-wise than the Tigers in 2015, Doc.
I have to disagree. I think the Tigers really realistically thought that this year they could make the playoffs and really contend for a World Series. With the pitching staff, with a healthy ball club, that this team, with the right mix of youth and veterans, could have taken the next step. And what made it more disappointing was they got off to a great start.
Yep, 11-2.
And then they hit the skids and were never able to recover. And I do think, though, with a different manager, with a couple different breaks happening, and with 1 or 2 more guys in the bullpen that could have held things together, then this team could have done damage. I think what happened was it was a combination of the injuries with some really inadequate in-game managing, and with the fact that Justin Verlander really didn't hit his stride until after the All-Star break. Once they got into the slide, I really felt like they weren't able to get out of it. And that really points to maybe the lack of leadership. And it kind of was hinted at the end of the year that maybe some of these guys wished that Torrey Hunter might have stayed here in Detroit, not based on performance, but just based on his ability to be that glue guy, the guy in the locker room that when you go through a couple game losing streak, instead of maybe extending it out to 4 to 5 games, could have been that guy that could have rallied the team to cut off those losing streaks. And, back during the 2014 offseason, people would have thought, giving Torrey Hunter all that money for his production? No way. But now, when you really look back at it, and a lot of the players like Castellanos kind of said that, hey, we kind of missed that leadership in the clubhouse, because guys like Victor Martinez, guys like Cabrera aren't rah-rah guys. Those are guys that just
They're not vocal leaders.
They're not vocal leaders.
Yeah.
So Torrey Hunter was that guy. And I really do believe one injury and one vocal leader that could have rallied that troop when things got tough and you would have had a different set of circumstances with this team, which made it that much more disappointing based on the trend of the ball club. This season was a disappointment. I do think a couple of breaks going the Tigers' way and an in-game manager that could have maybe handled situations differently with the bullpen and the starters, and you would have had a much better record and a team that would have made the playoffs.
But Hunter wasn't the difference maker. You're not saying that because look at the bullpen
production,
all season long.
No, not production-wise. He would have been a guy that once they got into that 3 to you remember early in the year they had 8-game losing streak. I think a guy like that might have been able to stop it and curb it once it hit 2 or 3 or 4. Remember, that 8-game losing streak really derailed the whole season. You got off to such a great start, and then after that great start, you really played well under 500 baseball. Maybe a leader, a guy in the clubhouse, might have handled the whole Iglesias debacle in a much better way, where that would have not happened. A lot of people thought that. A lot of people are kind of talking behind the scenes that Iglesias is not a good teammate. He might have gotten to him and talked to him a little bit, and
maybe knock some sense into him, right?
I think the Tigers had the more disappointing year, based on expectations.
But the bullpen was miserable from the start, even with Joakim Soria as a closer, right? Alex Wilson came out of nowhere. Luckily, he was good and reliable, because after Soria was dealt, it was Wilson, and even with and without Rondon, when he was there, he was iffy as well. So, all these guys were iffy, unreliable arms outside of Alex Wilson for most of the season, outside of Soria when he was here in the first half. But once they dealt him, it was Wilson and then Rondon maybe here and there, but he wasn't great. Like I said, wasn't overly dominant. But they had a lot of lackluster options in the pen at the back end and in the middle innings. Then the rotation, they had nobody outside of David Price until JV really picked it up in the second half, but he was horrible. Remember, JV missed all that time. All those games. Then when he first started, his first 5 at least starts were not good quality starts. He had a lot of struggles there. Then he picked it up, showed the JV form of old, and looked like JV was bringing his varsity stuff again, as Rod Allen would put it. Wow. So for me, the rotation was so weak, so depleted, and also by injuries, JV missing that first half. But it was more than that. It wasn't just him missing the first half or David Price being dealt. It was a rotation 1 through 5 as a whole. And the bullpen as a whole, too, just being so lackluster this year, Doc.
By the time David Price was dealt, they had already realized our playoff aspirations were over.
Because the team was not that good going into it. They overestimated the team and what it could bring, I think, this season as a whole. The rotation and pen weren't good, though, to start, I think.
Yeah.
Weren't as good as people thought. And I know you thought the rotation, I did too, was good, but we overrated it. And I think a lot of people did, Doc. And the bullpen wasn't good from the jump. From opening day, from that first game, we knew the bullpen wasn't good. The rotation underachieved a little bit, but it just wasn't that good or as good as people thought either. And as good, definitely, as I thought, Doc, going into the season.
Yeah, it was a situation where, when you looked at it May, June, July, that stretch was just brutal. And what you did see, though, there were a stretch of games, you could say about a dozen games, where we had the lead 6th, 7th, 8th inning, and we blew it in the bullpen. So
that was the middle innings and the late inning, guys. That's how bad it was.
There was nobody you could count on. And by then, the organization decided that, it's time to kind of look to the future, and they made the moves to, brush aside Dave Dombrowski and promote Al Avila. But I think the reason why you look at the Tigers being disappointing is based on the fact that the payroll was set that high at $170 million. You really look to this year as maybe the year of winning it all. You have the dominant ace, you have the MVP caliber and Hall of Famer Miguel Cabrera. There aren't too many ball clubs that could say that they have a legitimate 1-2 best pitcher in all of baseball, and a guy like Justin Verlander, who maybe not in the top 3 of all of baseball, but at least in the top 10. And then you have decent guys in Anibal Sanchez, and you tried to fill in with a guy like Big Pasta, but it just didn't work out. In that, the moves that they, what really happened? They really wanted guys to kind of just overachieve just maybe 5%. And nobody did that.
No, Shane Green didn't. He wasn't as good as advertised. Alfredo Simon, Big Pastas, wasn't as good as advertised either. And those guys, I think, were overrated maybe by the Tigers front office brass and club officials. I think they thought more of those guys. The one guy who did
him was J.D. Martinez. He cemented himself as a guy that was an offensive threat, a guy that you can now kind of cement as a guy that you can kind of foreshadow his numbers, 35 to 45 home runs a year with a ton of RBIs and key hits. You can kind of slot him into that. But everybody else, Ghost was awful.
Lackluster, or underachieved to a certain extent at least. Ghost, for most of the season, agreed.
And did you look at the numbers?
They're lucky they had J.D. Martinez be that bright spot, Doc.
The Tigers won a significant percentage of their games when Rajai Davis was in there. And I don't understand, when you look at the percentage, if you're a sabermetrics guy or if you're a stats guy, the games that Rajai Davis was in, they won a bigger percentage of. So Ghost going forward, he lived up to that terrible offensive,
Can't hit, light hitting guy, great fielder, can go and track down a lot of balls. But Davis, you're right, Doc, got it done more often, but he's not coming back. He'll be gone this offseason, more than likely, leaving in free agency. So you're losing him, going with Ghost as your starting center fielder next year. I don't like the Tigers with that alignment in the outfield of him, specifically him starting at center field. JD Martinez in right, very good. Has a good glove out there, too, and can hit it. They're lucky he came to form, like you said. He was one of the lone bright spots consistently from day one, opening day, to the end of the season. And even him, he showed some woes in the first half or in the first month or so of the season. Where he wasn't that great, but then he picked it up because I thought maybe this guy had hit a wall and wouldn't be as good as advertised, as good as last year at least. But he was even better than last year. Wasn't he, Doc?
Well, Vito, I'm gonna do this. I win the argument. I win the flash poll of one. We've had one tweet since my question of who had the more disappointing baseball season, the Tigers or Nationals. Real Life Jeremy says #Tigers.
Well, they only know the Tigers. Your fans only know the Tigers. They don't even know who the Nationals are. Where do they play?
One tweet poll indicates that the Doc wins the argument. You're not going to win.
1-0, please. Small sample size, okay? Talk to me when you have about 10 votes or 20 or 30 votes in your favor, Doc. And who do they know? They know the Tigers and all their woes. They don't know the Nats' woes from day one to the end of the season. The Nats had a good amount themselves.
Well, you've done a good job making the argument for the Nationals.
Well, at least I did do that, right?
Yeah, when you shell out all that money for a starting pitcher and you don't even make the playoffs, not even an early exit, not even make the playoffs.
Not even a first-round exit, like you said. They should have made the first round at least with that talent on that ball club this year. And they disappointed mightily, in my opinion, because they didn't even make it into the first round, Doc. And you brought up a bright spot, JD Martinez. Another one, Daniel Norris. How about Norris? Let's talk about Norris.
Yes, we're going to talk about that, and I want to get your opinion first on this, though.
I'll let that happen, Doc.
I read a report on the Detroit News. I know someone that you respect, but you're a freak guy. You checking on the news?
What was the latest? Tell me.
Okay.
You got to tell me first. Yeah.
Yep. The news article came out that said that the Tigers should look into renegotiating his contract and extending him now, JD Martinez.
I saw that, yes.
Instead of waiting, because if he produces another 35 to 45 home run year or even goes above that, then you're looking at $25 million a year to secure the services of one JD Martinez. So I'm in agreement now that you kind of secure him and get him locked up, because if he has another massive year, you're going to have a whole bunch of suitors looking to take him off your hands.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people will think he is mighty sexy on the open market. So you got to lock him up right now. Lock him down for 5 years, I would say. If you can get him under $100 million or even you don't want to go to $100 million. That's the thing. You got to sign him right now.
I think you have to go to $100
million. I think you would have to if he goes on the open market and continues hitting 35 to 40 home runs a year. If he does it next year, too, he would get that kind of money. But it's about consistency in baseball. He has not been a model of consistency yet at his young age. He's picking it up, starting to look like it. But he's got to have another year, in my opinion, to get paid $15 million at least. So right now,
12.
You pay him 12. See if he'll take it. If not, then you end up paying him. You negotiate with them and go up to 15. I say 15 is the tops now for JD.
See, here's the problem. If he has another great year, it exponentially goes way up to 25.
And then it might be 20. Well, it's 20. Let's say 20 million. That's still too much, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. That's why I agree with you. Let's sign him right now for 12. Let's try 12 first and go to 15. But 15 mil is tops for me right now for JD. Then you just have to...
How long? But see, guys like
you take the bullet then later on and just have to pay him $20 million if he has another great year or two of hitting 35 to 40. That's a risk that I would take if I was the Tigers front office brass.
That's not a bad number. 7 years, $105 million. That's $15 million a year.
If you get him for 6 years at least, or at least 5, at about... That would be 20, though. That's what I'm saying. You got to wait to pay him 20, I'm saying.
Yeah.
I would take the risk, take the bullet right now, and then specifically wait until he becomes an actual free agent to pay him that $20 million if he really wants that $20 million a year.
No, I'm saying,
I want to see more.
What I'm saying is, if you throw out that $15 million and you extend years, like a lot, it depends on what
years. Okay,
it depends on what guys want. If guys want big money now, then it's not going to matter the length of the contract. He's going to want 20, 25 per, and whoever gives him the most years. What I'm saying is, now if you go to him and say, "Listen, we're going to lock you up for 7 years at $105 million. That's $15 million a year, guaranteed for the next 7 years in his prime, in the ages of 28 to 35.
Yep.
That's not a bad number. But if you're JD Martinez, then you gamble on yourself one more good year, and
I get $20 million over 6 or 7.
No, then you're looking at potentially $180 million over 10 years, or maybe $200 million over 10 years, where you can get a lot of money and a long-term deal. So that's where the gamble is if you don't lock him up, the amount of money you're going to have to pay him to keep him, and you can't just pay everybody. We can't pay everybody on the roster $20 million. We already got a bunch of them.
Can't do it. No matter how good JD is. That's why they're not going to give him $20 million or anything close to that right now, because they can't afford to do so. And he's too young in his career. He's got to prove it more of the consistency over the long term. Okay. That's why I would give him 5 years, $15 million right now, tops.
5 years, huh?
Okay. $15 million tops right now.
Okay, so now you're role reverse. You're JD Martinez. The organization comes to you and is like, we're going to offer you 5 to 6 years, $15 million per. Do you secure it now, or do you wait one more 162 game stretch for the chance at the cash-in lottery contract?
I wouldn't risk it. But you know what? I'm always a guy that plays it safe. Mm-hmm. If you really want to risk it, look at Max Scherzer. His former counterpart with the Tigers. He risked it and got paid a lot more money than he would have with the Tigers.
See, here's the thing. I've realized now in talking about contracts and negotiations how I would be now. At 36 years old, I know what I would want.
What would you want?
I would want a little bit less money. When you're talking about between 15 and 20 million, it's relatively the same. I mean, you're just talking about, a couple $1 million in taxes here and there. What I would do is I'd go to the Tigers right now. I'd be like, secure me for 8 years at $15 million per, or 14. Or longer. Okay, so then 7 years. I would try to get the longest term at a nice price and get security, knowing that I'm not going to break the bank at 14, 15 mil. I can keep my expectations around 30 to 35 million, and my team can bring in other guys. And if something were to happen and maybe I fall off a little bit, I might still be tradable to another team. But having a guaranteed contract, because it's guaranteed. Once I sign my name,
guaranteed money.
I'm getting paid no matter what. I'm getting paid if I decide to hit well or not.
I want to get hurt, go fly a plane, or go fly on the wings of a plane, like remember DeAndre Levy did? Come on.
I'm a guy that wants long-term security, and I would take a little bit less money, like a Jerome Bettis, or like guys that are team guys.
There's not too many of those nowadays, and it's about getting paid ultimately. And right now,
my agent would hate my guts. My agent would call me into my agents, MLB baseball.
Yeah, you wouldn't be good for the PA, for the Players Association.
Other players would be texting me being like, hey, man, you're lowering the cap.
Yeah, take more money, buddy. They would tell you, definitely. And I say 5 years, 15 mil at tops. I would start negotiating with them at 4 years, 12 mil a season, then go up to 5 for 15 mil a year tops. He should take that, though. He's not proven yet. He'd be stupid not to take that, Doc.
Yeah, he would be. I would if he's given a long-term offer at a decent price between 10 and 15, he should take it. He should take it. I don't think he should wait and gamble, because he's just one tweak of his groin or one situation where maybe he tweaks his leg running, and that's it. And you've lost your chance.
Well, if he loses his power stroke too, that's what is getting him paid big bucks right now from the Tigers or somebody else in the future. So he's got to keep that power stroke. If he ever loses that for whatever reason, he will not get paid even close to 12 mil. So that's a risk that you take by not taking a deal right now if the Tigers are willing to truly negotiate a deal with them to extend them for maybe 4 or 5 years. That's why I would take it if I was JD Martinez.
And now the news of the week. Wow. I was recording a podcast yesterday, and I kind of was doing some research, and I was looking, and I saw the news that Daniel Norris came out and announced that he had thyroid cancer throughout the 2015 season, and both the Blue Jays and the Tigers knew about it before the trade was made. And Brad Ausmus utilized him to a great extent after. What a fascinating story regarding Daniel Norris, his thyroid cancer, and his use. The Tigers trading for a guy that they knew was potentially ill. And the Tigers, you remember that game that you railed about on a couple podcasts back where they let him throw
54 pitches in the first inning
and brought him back,
right?
And they knew it. Brad Ausmus knew that he was
had thyroid cancer at that time. He knew it when he was traded for.
What do you make of all this?
It looks ludicrous now for Brad Ausmus to let him stay out there for all those pitches, but he wanted to deal with it. He manned up, and it's not even manning up, because, cancer battles is a battle for everybody, no matter if you're the biggest man in the world, littlest man, littlest woman, or biggest woman in the world. It's a battle, a tough battle for every single person. For him to be willing to go through all that and to still pitch every 5th day after he got back from his injury, which was non-related to the thyroid cancer, I give him tons of props and more power. It was inconceivable. It would be impossible for me to do that. I would give it all up and say, I'm focusing on my cancer, dealing with that and all the treatment and all the repercussions from the treatment. Because it was tough for him physically to be ready then every 5th day for the Tigers. For me, mightily impressive, and I give him props for that. And I say he should have not have even pitched. I would not have even considered it, Doc, if I was in his shoes. That says something about his character, his persona, his grittiness as a pitcher, as a baseball player too. This guy is a future bona fide ace, potentially. A guy that can get it done at least as a second or third starter. He showed that just by going through all that, his toughness, because you need that toughness to be an every fifth day starter. He has that already. That's why he could be an ace or a great number 2 one day. And I like him for that, and I'm happy that he's a member of the Detroit Tigers.
You know, Vito, why I enjoy talking to you is that you can be my I'm the fanatic. I'm the guy that just rails, doesn't filter my thoughts about sports. So you're the guy that is going to be from now on. And I apologize for this because that means you're going to get a lot of texts. You're going to be my bastion of objectivity because I'm a guy that just throws out ideas in terms of sports. Everything else in my life, I'm very rational. I think things through. But in sports, and if you follow our Twitter account at Detroit Podcast, you'll know that really the essence and the thesis of that Twitter page is whatever's in my sports brain comes out. No filter, nothing. That's what that Twitter page is, and that's why it's been successful. But I need to kind of know, am I thinking like a dickhead or like an insensitive person by thinking that the Tigers traded David Price, their ace, a guy that can command a lot for a guy that's ill? Is that a dickhead thought?
Well, they knew it was treatable. Dave D knew it was treatable. This will not be a problem long term.
Yeah, not long term.
For Daniel Norris.
But he's not 100% healthy. No matter what, he's always at risk for a future, maybe tired.
Maybe, right? Something coming back.
The extenuating circumstances where maybe he's a little bit more tired or lethargic dealing with this. Just that notion, in my mind, as a general manager, might lead me to be, if we're talking in a group and on in a round table, I might be like,
why'd you trade for him, really, right? If you knew that, you had that red flag already.
Wish him luck. It's not something you talk about publicly, but you'd go, I've seen, have you seen?
John Lester did it, remember? He battled back from cancer.
Okay. So that's why I'm asking you, but I did see, if you look online, you do readings, they do when there's a list of free agents or there's lists of guys that are going to come out from the draft in all these sports, they have these reports, and I've gotten to see what scouting reports look like. And Vito, they don't hold back. They say strengths, athletic, question marks, bad family, health.
They don't mess around.
They don't mess around, and they write in detail. Health could potentially limit his capability in the future. So I'm looking at that scouting report, and I see history of cancer or is diagnosed with thyroid cancer. I might be one of those guys in the meeting that says, let's just kind of look at someone else. Am I being a dick
I think
no?
so, a little bit of a dick. I'll say this because
you're a dick.
Yeah, you're a dick a little bit, Doc. But you know that,
You're
right? With your point here, I think you believe that you are being one a little bit too because it's treatable, it's curable. This could happen to any of us, by the way, too. It's random, very random how you get cancer, more than likely, unless you have a family history of it. And even then, you might not or might get it. So you never know when you're going to get it, when you're going to battle this. And John Lester made it back from battling cancer to become an ace starting pitcher for the Bo Sox first, and now the Cubbies. For me, with that being said, it's about the talent of the starting arm, of the all-around pitcher that is Daniel Norris. Because he is a good all-around pitcher and can be even a better one going forward, you take that risk with him of a flare-up happening or another health scare. And as I said, you never know when a health scare will happen with any of us, with any of those pitchers or hitters, or a freak accident where somebody gets into a car accident. God forbid if that happened. Nobody wants to see it, but humans get into accidents. Accidents happen to us as human beings and to these guys who are also our human beings every day of our lives. So you never know what could happen, but I imagine he will be healthier, will be fine going forward, and with the grace of God, he will be healed perfectly, completely of this cancer and not have to worry about it any time going forward. And that's why I said you take the risk, you still deal for him. He's a top-line starting pitching prospect, so you don't worry about that too much. And because you knew in the back of your head, from all reports, it was a treatable version of thyroid cancer. And good for him in terms of that. And all our prayers from the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, DetroitSportsNation.com. You and I, Doc,
this
go
is performance
out to him too.
Yes. I give Daniel Norris all the credit for doing this. I'm talking just as a executive.
As a fan, too, and as a front office executive, looking to deal for him, right?
I want Daniel Norris to be successful here in Detroit. I'm talking about now, not today. We got him. So now he's a Tiger. I support him 100%. I'll definitely be rooting for him, and it actually makes me feel like he's much more of a warrior for going through this and doing it.
It's a feel-good story. I'm being a good starting pitcher.
I'm rewinding my brain to the trade deadline when all the general managers and the staff meet. I would be the guy that just might be like, slowly raising my hand. They'd be like, Doc, put your hand down, damn it. You're hogging up the meeting. I'd be like, I know. Sorry, but it says here on the cons that he's got thyroid cancer. I have to bring this up.
Yeah.
Maybe can we get something else? Can we maybe look at a different situation for David? This is David Price. This is David Price. We are deconstructing our franchise. It says here in big red letters, thyroid cancer. they'd be like, John, get out of the meeting. And I'd be like, oh, okay, sorry. And I'd be like, dang, I'm right. And then in the end, then I go to the media. I'd be like, I was the voice that said not to do it if he flames out.
But then Norris will prove you wrong, prove all the doubters wrong out there who think
I hope
he
he
has
does.
thyroid
I hope he
cancer.
does.
And you hope that he does, which is still good. You're still a fan of the Tigers and of Norris.
Always. I'll always be a fan of whoever plays for the Tigers. I'm just a guy that's just, that's my initial thought. I was like,
scary, but you know what? You don't let it get the best of you. You say to yourself, Norris, if he's good, he's going to be good no matter what, and he's going to get past his illness.
Sports is not a sensitive business. It's a big.
It's not. You can tell with all of us talking about it, people writing about it, and what they have to deal with. Those players dealing with that cancer then too, and the other pressures that come in, right? As for being a starting pitcher, there's a lot of pressures out there for these guys.
You got to remember, they're writing checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars. That ties into it a little bit, is the financial commitment to, a guy like Daniel Norris, and the fact that we need a guy that's going to be,
close
valuable.
To David Price, right?
That's what he's got to come close to. So that's okay. So
I believe he can live up to it, and I'm fine with him, even though he has cancer. I'm fine with him being a member of the starting pitching staff. I think he can be good next year.
I'm going to get a gavel, and for the first ruling, Vito rules Doc's questioning of Daniel Norris dickhead
as invalid. And you know what? You're a dick. Just deal with it. As that said, you're a dick, and just deal with it. And now it's time to move on to the pitching coach of Daniel Norris and the Tigers' starting arms and bullpen arms. The former now bullpen coach, Jeff Jones, retiring after serving in 4 different stints as a bullpen coach with the Tigers from 95 until 2002. Started off with the organization in 89, retired, I think, in 87 from being a pitcher himself. And I don't think he ever made it to the bigs, or if he did, very briefly. But with all that said, very long stint with the Tigers in separate years, in separate managerial tenures where he was with Phil Gardner, I think Buddy Bell there in the 90s. And then in 06 started off with the Tigers and hasn't left since. So since Jim Leyland took over as a manager, when he did in 06, he was a bullpen coach. And then when Rick Knapp, the former pitching coach of the Tigers, was fired at the All-Star break of 2011, guess what? Jeff Jones stepped up and became the pitching coach then, and then stayed on as a pitching coach until the end of the 2015 season. And now he's going, Doc.
Well-respected guy. I'm going to keep my thoughts on it brief.
Yep.
I'm glad at this point in time, some changes needed to be made. And if he felt like it was time for him to retire, then I wish him the best. He was a guy that kind of at the end of his tenure, some people look to say, well, maybe we could have went away from him, gotten someone a little bit better. But for the work that he did with these young pitchers and things like that, I give him credit. He was a valuable asset to the organization. He really didn't, hurt the organization. It's just that maybe when you look at it, there might have been someone else that could have maybe done the job better these last couple years. So Jeff Jones, enjoy retirement. I hope that the things that you instilled in these young pitchers, maybe a guy like a Lobstein, Kyle Ryan, Shane Green, can go forward with a new guy, because the real question mark was a lot of the young guys that came up from the minors, AAA, AA, didn't really get that much better. They kind of were what they were, and you didn't see someone come up like a Norris right away and just shine. They were up and down. And do you say, well, is that the coaching? Is that their lack of talent? I just think
maybe talent a little bit too.
Both ways, but in the end, maybe someone else might have gotten these guys to be a little bit more consistent, not get shelled every other start, maybe every third or fourth start. That's what I'm thinking.
That's wishful thinking.
No, I think they got basically Boyd got shelled every other start. Ryan got shelled every other start.
Well, that's not in the control of the bullpen or the pitching coach. The pitching coach can only tell you to do so much. The pitcher has to go out there and get it done and perform to a high level. Listening to all the stuff that the pitching coach told him to do, to refine his craft, or just to know what to do, how to approach these batters. Well, the pitcher can know that as a result of the pitching coach telling him, but the pitcher has to actually execute it. That's the word. Execution is key. Pitchers have to execute. These guys haven't. In recent memory, they did it this year specifically.
Listen,
and
Vito,
it's not on Jeff Jones. And Jones did a good job, remember, after coming on board in 2011 at the All-Star break. Justin Verlander finished that season, remember, as a Cy Young Award winner and MVP. Not saying that Jeff Jones made him that Cy Young Award winner and MVP, but also, the Tigers were inconsistent with their pitching before he came on board in 2011. He came on board, everybody got better, and instantaneously almost. As a mentor to Max Scherzer, Scherzer got better as well. Who went from a very inconsistent power pitcher, remember, to a very reliable one.
You've exceeded the quota. You're only allowed to disagree with me once per podcast. Now that's twice. So if you're saying...
I'll do it again. I don't care, Doc. This is my podcast, too, by the way.
That's right.
But you know that. We're just joking here. And Jones, as I said, helped out Scherzer, helped out Verlander. So for me, Jonesy, a positive stay in Motown. And with that, Doc, hey, thanks to you once again, to Michael Natelli of Fansided's MLB blog, Call to the Pen. I might be writing for this site, so check me out there. Check Michael Natelli out there at Fansided's Call to the Pen, too, going forward for all his great insight on the world of baseball. And thanks to all of you for listening as well, for downloading this edition, the 13th episode. Yes, we've made it to 13 episodes of the podcast. And next week, episode number 14. Tune in then next Wednesday for another great and fresh batch of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Have a great one, guys, and talk to you then.